Welcome to Planted, Finding Your Roots in STEM Careers. Journey with us as we navigate the winding path into tree and plant-related careers with professionals who have taken root or are still branching out. I'm Megan Wiesbrook.
And I'm Jessica Turner-Scoff. Today on Planted, we have the one and only Anna Ball, the president and CEO of Ball Horticultural Company. So this season of Planted, we're talking about traits that you can have or that you can develop in a STEM career. And given Anna's prestigious position as president and CEO, we knew that she'd be the perfect person to talk about leadership. So thank you so much for being here today, Anna.
Oh, I'm super excited to be here.
So before we jump into the topic of leadership, we want to give our listeners a chance to get to know you a bit. And so we have a couple things that link to you, and if you could talk about each of them a little bit before we get started. So those three things that we have listed for you are horticulture, family business, and global reach.
Okay, well, I was super fortunate to be born into a horticulture family business. So that ticks off the first two right there, right? My grandfather, who started the business, was in Japan in 1949 when he died, actually. He was on his way to Japan, and he was going to be trading, had petunia seeds in his pocket, and he was trading petunia seeds with Mr. Sakata, who's we still do a lot of business with him today. So it's always been a global business, even in the 30s, before the war and after the war, and up until today. So I guess I have a global horticultural family business. So that's how those three things relate.
Perfect. Well, I know in previous episodes and with guests, we've talked a lot about, horticulture and what that is. But if you could share a little bit about your definition of horticulture and then also how that is different from the term floriculture, which sometimes gets used in conjunction when talking.
Right. I always define horticulture as the art, science, technology, and business of plants. Floriculture is a subset of horticulture. It's really more about the things in horticulture that are there for beauty, like cut flowers or annuals or perennials or indoor foliage plants, things that you do for beauty in the garden and inside.
Anna, I know that Ball Horticulture Company, you say that you are feeding the soul of the world, especially with how you're bringing beauty to people, and that makes people happy. Can you talk a little bit about something that kind of connects you to that, and what's something that you really love about what you do?
Well, that feeding the soul of the world really gets me up in the morning, I would say. It's very important to me. And really what I'm excited about and what I love is the power that plants have, the power of plants, because they can bring joy to individuals. I remember once being in China a few decades ago when it wasn't that long after the people were not allowed to have flowers during a long time, and there was hardly any place to get them. And this older woman, who'd been without flowers probably most of her life, was walking out and she'd bought these in one of the few places to buy flowers. She'd bought this bouquet of red carnations. First I thought she was holding a baby. I thought, boy, she's a little old to be having a baby. And all these women were around her, and they were just such joy in their faces. And I've never forgotten that scene. I remember exactly where it was. The joy that those flowers had brought them because they hadn't had them for so long. So that was just wonderful. So that's the power of plants, but also the power of plants is what plants can do to transform cities like downtown Chicago, what they can do to increase productivity, how they can get people out of the hospital faster, reduce crime. There's tons of usefulness of plants that we really haven't gotten that story out that much, that well. And that's the power of plants. They're incredibly powerful.
And we encourage our listeners to check out our bonus content because we'll have some information about the power of plants. So, thank you so much for sitting down with us. We can't wait to hear more about your career and how leadership plays such an important role in the work that you do.
So, Anna, as a leader, can you tell us a little bit about what your role as president and CEO involves?
A couple of things. One is I think most people know that every company or organization has a personality. Mm-hmm. In business jargon, we call it corporate culture, but it's really the personality of a company or an organization. And you've heard about, say, Google or Twitter's culture, where it's kind of a freewheeling culture. And then on the other hand, you have like maybe an old-style bank or law firm that has more of a structured kind of culture. And there's not any good or bad culture or right or wrong culture, but there are differences. And the job of the CEO is really to make sure that you are maintaining that corporate culture, because the culture determines how people make decisions, who makes decisions and how they make decisions. So it's pretty darn important that you make sure that the culture is the one you want it to be. And by the way, if you're looking to go into the work world, you should make sure that the culture of the company or organization that you're going into fits your personality, because that's super important. And we've had some wonderful people that we've hired that have been very good but just don't quite fit the culture. So that's pretty important. So the CEO has to be constantly reinforcing that culture to keep it strong. And that's something you can never let up on. So decisions you make all day long really reinforce or don't reinforce the culture, who you promote, what questions you ask, all those kinds of things. So that's one thing I think is very important. The other is just deciding what to invest in. Just like you have a budget in your own home and you have to figure out, should I buy a sofa or should I go on vacation? We have to make those same kind of decisions all the time, too. We're an older company. We're 115 years old, so we obviously want to be around for another 100 years. So we invest for the long term. Those are very difficult decisions to make. I remember my mother always said, if you spend $1 on something, you're not spending it on something else because resources are limited. So we make those decisions. We're making a lot of them right now that are kind of difficult. Do we put money into advanced technologies to support breeders? Do we build a new greenhouse in Korea? Do we update our offices for the employees? So we're making those decisions now, and we make them as a team, of course, with a lot of people involved. But ultimately, it's my decision on what we spend money on.
So you get to make a lot of tough calls and tough choices as CEO.
Right.
And speaking of tough choices, when you were a kid, what did you think was going to be your choice in a career? Did you always know you were going to be in a family business, or was there something else that you were called to do?
No, I think I was a super late bloomer, because I don't remember these people who know they want to be marine biologists when they're 4 years old. I don't know if they're just making that up or what, but I really had no clue when I was a kid what I wanted to be, and I really didn't think about it that much, I'm embarrassed to say. I'm a boomer, so at that time women weren't really under the same pressure to think about careers when they were younger, so maybe that was part of it. But I really didn't get into the business until my late 20s, when I had tried a few other things that weren't very satisfying, and I kind of didn't have a job. So my dad said, well, we need some help up at the company, and I just sort of looked at it as a job, to lead on to something else. And then all of a sudden I started working there, and I saw this cool company in this wonderful industry, and I just kind of fell in love with it. So I kind of was an accidental horticulture business person, maybe.
I think it's wonderful, though, to hear that sometimes you have to do a couple things that you end up not liking to kind of really know when you are in a spot that you really like and you really feel like you can thrive. I'm curious as to kind of what was your educational background that kind of led you, to those decisions early on that, maybe allowed you to really evaluate, that you liked being where you were. So if you could talk a little bit about, your educational background. What did you major in? What was your background prior to being at Ball?
Well, I had a whole bunch of different majors. I changed, one of those people who change majors a lot. I majored in music and English and French and everything. I ended up majoring in anthropology for my bachelor's, just because of a fantastic professor who was utterly fascinating but I didn't do anything with anthropology. That was just sort of an accidental thing too, I guess. And then we had a board member way back when I was first starting out, who said I should really get an MBA, because he said it'll give you respect in the business and confidence. So I did go back and get an MBA. It took a long time. It took 5 years going down to the city on the train 2 or 3 nights a week.
That's so impressive.
It was a slog, let me tell you. And honestly, if I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't do it. It did give me confidence. It did give me respect, I think. But what they taught us in the MBA really weren't the kinds of things that I found very quickly that I needed in business. I mean, they teach you that sort of things can be analyzed, and this is how you analyze them, and business is messy. I mean, reality is a lot messier than that. And I think I learned a lot more during the day when I was working than I did at night when I was in my MBA. So I'm not a huge MBA fan. I think it's important for some people, but it wasn't really for me.
Can you talk a little bit about, a lot of times when we talk about horticulture, we talk about the growing side. Can you talk a little bit about what you feel is the greatest part about working on more the business side of horticulture?
Yes, I think that's a good question because I think business is sort of underappreciated or undervalued or under-talked about in the whole STEM area. Business is a fascinating institution. It's extremely varied. You can use any skill, any trade, anything you're interested in, you can find a position in businesses. We hire R&D people, we hire PhDs in molecular biology, we hire customer service people, we hire IT people, product management, sales. I mean, anything you're interested in, you can do it in the business world, and you can do it with plants. And I think that has not been communicated, I think, well enough to some of the younger people. And we really, affect tons of people. You can affect a lot of people in the business world, and you can do wonderful things. So I'm a huge business fan. I think it's been underrepresented.
You touched on how it has an impact on a lot of people, and I would love for you to kind of talk a little bit more about how your business is really impacting the world in a really positive way.
Yes, we impact the world through bringing beauty to the world, as we've talked about, and doing all the things that plants can do. But we also have a big impact on the world in the different locations where we are. We're in a lot of different locations around the world. Many of those locations are in countries where they aren't so developed because we have to be in climates that are good for production. So those tend to be Central America or Asia or some parts of the world where they're not so developed. So we've had, in some of the places we've been for 50 or 60 years, we've had whole towns grow up around our locations because we've been providing jobs for people and careers for people and really given people an opportunity to raise their standard of living. We have right now in Nicaragua, we were just talking about this today, actually this morning, we have a fairly new location in Nicaragua, which is pretty big, and we've got a lot of employees down there, and it's a very poor area. Nicaragua is a very poor country. And so what we're going to do is build a school right next to our greenhouse down there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I know. So the employees can come, they can bring their kids, and they can go to school while they're at work, and the schools there are not very good at all. So we're helping with the education, and we can raise the whole standard of living in that whole area where we are. We also provide a lot of medical care we have nurses at our locations and doctors at some of them, so we can provide good medical care. So business can have a huge impact in helping people out of poverty and helping people get careers and better livelihoods. So if you want to impact the world, join a business.
That's really amazing.
I think it's wonderful to hear about. I think a lot of people, when they focus on business, it's profit driven. It kind of has that. A lot of times that side of it is so strongly focused on, and so it's wonderful to hear about all the other social impacts and ways that businesses can really grow communities and support the individuals that also help them grow. So that's wonderful to hear. A great example, and kind of talking about, and we've talked a lot about what leadership looks like in your role as president and CEO, but also curious as to what the trait leadership means to you, and what, when you think about that trait, how has it been part of your career?
Yeah, I think it's been a journey, because when I started out, in the company, I was trying to figure out what this leadership thing was all about, right? I didn't really understand it. And I thought, well, if you're going to be a leader, there has to be a formula for how to be a leader. I was pretty naive back then, but anyway. So I decided, well, I would read a bunch of books, and I would join all these organizations, and that would teach me how to be a leader. So joining these groups of already successful business people, I was just shocked at how there were really no similarities among them. I remember sitting at a dinner table once in this big fancy club in downtown Chicago, and my table was all successful, which I wasn't yet, but successful business people. And on my left was this guy who was a total risk avoider, very introverted guy who ran a successful business. And on my right was this backslapping kind of extroverted guy who was a huge risk taker in his business. And that's really when it hit me that, hey, there's no formula here. And I'm just going to have to figure it out as I go along. And that's kind of what I've been doing. I think what I've figured out is that leadership is really all about putting other people first. I like to say it's not about you. It's not about you. And that's what I tell people. So it's about creating a team, or it's creating if you're running a team, if you're a leader of a team, it's about creating the team. It's not about you creating the team, it's about the team. And if you're running a company, it's not about you, it's about the company. And you have to build it up so it survives you, it goes beyond you. And that's super important. Also in leadership, I think you have to spend a lot of time making sure that employees understand why they're doing the work that they're doing and what they're doing, and explain to them the meaning and the purpose of their work. Why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? Because it's part of coloring the world. Why are they working on this project? How does it fit into the whole thing? I remember once I was walking around this park and there were these guys putting up one of those orange construction temporary fences, and I knew there was going to be some sort of activity there. So I stopped and I asked the guy, what's the fence for? What's going to go on tonight? And he just looked at me and he said, how do I know? Nobody ever tells us anything.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought, wow, his boss told him to go out and build this fence here, but he didn't tell him why. So he had no pleasure finding out, he's creating some, maybe it was going to be an art show or something, that he could go home and tell his family that I helped, with this art show, or maybe he sees it in the newspaper and that was me. I mean, I just couldn't believe. I thought, how sad is that? So that's what a leader has to do a lot, just spend a lot of time explaining to people, like sometimes, your alarm goes off early and you're thinking, why the heck do I have to get up? And then you remember, oh yes, I got to help color the world. That's what I want our employees thinking. And it's true. They are helping to color the world. So they need to be reminded of that, because sometimes, work's not all fun, right? So.
Right. I think it's really powerful that a big part of leadership is just reminding people of the purpose of what they're doing. And I thought it was really interesting hearing you talk kind of a little bit about the dichotomy, because it's not about you, but you also need to be your true, authentic self.
That's right.
When you're leading, which
Right.
I think is really interesting. And there's many different ways to be a leader, but you're not going to be a good leader if you are not playing to your own strengths.
That's right.
So
that's right.
that was
Absolutely.
really interesting. So what's been your best experience as a CEO?
I think the most satisfying experience for me are when I see people doing things that they didn't think they could do, or seeing teams do things that they thought were impossible, or seeing people do jobs that I used to do, but they're doing them a lot better than I did. That's a big kick too. We just introduced this. I don't know if you know what impatiens are, but they are a big bedding plant for the shade. And 10 years ago, the impatiens powdery downy mildew, was a disease that really kind of wiped them out. And so at that time we said, oh boy, there's no way. Everybody said it's impossible to come up with a resistance to this disease, because that little was known about it at the time. But over 10 years, we worked a team of, again, very varied people, product managers, marketing people, breeders, advanced technology people, scientists, all sorts of people worked on this team, and we introduced the beacon impatiens last 2 months ago, actually, and they said it couldn't be done. But to see that team work together and collaborate, which is really hard. Collaboration is a huge issue. It's very rare, good collaboration, but it's super important. To see them collaborate like that, that's a really good experience for me.
Congratulations. That's awesome about the impatiens.
Very exciting. Acting on that goal to color the world, I know you've worked extensively to expand your business from being, mainly North American based to being global. You have over 25 locations worldwide. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like and kind of what leading that charge looked like as well?
Yeah, going global is very interesting, super interesting. But it's super, super difficult. It's really challenging, I have to say. And it has changed a lot through the years. And I started traveling a lot in the early 80s to different countries. I would travel a lot in Asia with another woman, a colleague of mine. And we were really oddities back then. It was kind of uncomfortable because people would stare at us and people would giggle at the size of our feet and that kind of thing. So, and we had a lot of crazy experiences, and we got ripped off, and we chose the wrong partners, and we struggled with cultural differences and whatnot. We were really sort of pioneers in a way, I think, at that time, at least in our industry. So in some ways now it's a lot easier. I just gave a book that I finished recently about culture to one of our colleagues who's working in Asia, and I just told him, wow, if I'd had this in the early 80s, it would have been a lot easier. But there really wasn't a lot written up back then, actually. And so travel is easier now. You're not an oddity when you go to these countries, so it's easier. But still, it's difficult. There's huge cultural differences. We just were dealing with a woman a group in Thailand, and we wanted to do some sort of final negotiations, and we were all sitting around sort of a big lunchroom, and it was kind of a nice atmosphere, and we recommended that we go into a conference room to finish up the discussion, and we found out later that was a big mistake.
Oh, really?
Because the Thai people are sort of open and friendly, and they like things to be a little more fun than maybe Americans are much more serious, and she was kind of cautious of us being too businesslike. So that signaled that we were maybe too businesslike. So, I mean, how do you know that? I don't know. It's really hard. But it's challenging, but it's fun.
Well, that's really interesting. How American of you, I guess.
That's right. Very American.
So how do you continue to grow as a leader? I imagine that's something that you probably, you seem like somebody who spends a lot of time working to understand the world and improve yourself. So how do you continue to grow, and who mentors you?
Well, I have kind of a system. I guess you call it maybe a system, a kind of a loose system that I think about. And I do 3 things and try to integrate them so that I keep learning. One is I read all the time. I'm a big reader, so that's very important to me. It always has been. 2 is I'm a pretty good and I think heavy question asker. I even annoy people sometimes. I'm always asking questions. I find it fascinating to learn about people, so I ask a lot of questions. And then, of course, I travel, and I don't think you have to travel to exotic countries to learn. You can, if you go to the same town and have a pizza every Friday night, go to a different town and look around and see how the town is different. I mean, you can just do simple things like that. So those 3 things, reading, asking questions, and traveling, are 3 things I try to sort of feed off each other and kind of all integrate together. And then I learn a lot from asking questions, but I learn a lot from actually my employees, from my customers. I learn a lot from my daughter and my nieces and nephews, who are just constantly amazing to me, the younger people now. And I do have an outside board who they are my bosses. So they are probably technically my mentors, and they do a great job of bringing me outside perspective outside the field of horticulture.
That's great.
It's wonderful to hear, too, kind of how you have, found a system that works where you're kind of bringing all these pieces together so that you're incorporating, you're doing a lot of listening, you're doing a lot of asking questions, and how important that feedback kind of plays into how you grow. Mm-hmm. Along that vein of listening, we have some...
good transition, Megan. Good transition.
We recently had some teachers on site for a workshop, and we shared with them your profile and a little bit about you, and wanted to see if they had any questions that they wanted us to ask while we had you in for this episode. So can you tell us a little bit about what has been your favorite place that you've traveled for work?
I think my favorite country for work would be Japan, because for a Westerner like me, it has some Western sort of characteristics. They're pretty orderly. They follow the rules. They don't jaywalk, that kind of thing. You can trust them in business. And so on the surface, they're sort of it's a comfortable country to travel in. Still, it's very, very different. They think differently. It's hard to figure out. You can't read the body language, for example, if you're in a meeting. And they're just fascinating to me. I really like Japan, and I like the Japanese, and the food is good. That's always important. How's the food, right?
Oh, yeah. And I'll second that. One of my favorite vacations I ever went to was as an adult, I guess, is to Japan. And just, I loved, again, the dichotomy of, it's parts of it are so technologically advanced, and then the others, it's just, quiet in the mountains and serene. And so it's really cool, those different places that business can connect you to, or just travel in general.
That's right.
Can you talk a little bit about what life experience has been the most memorable in building your trait of leadership?
I think the life experience that maybe had the most effect on my leadership was when I was 21. I was in love with Captain Cook, and I read all of his biographies, and I wanted to see some of the places that he went to, and I wanted to see the Southern Cross, which is a constellation in the Southern Hemisphere. So I was 21, and I decided I was going to hitchhike around the world by myself.
Oh, my gosh.
And visit some of the Captain Cook places. And so that trip, it took a year, and it was fantastic. And it really taught me a bunch of things. It taught me to rely on other people, because when you're traveling alone, which I would recommend, because you have got to meet other people, and you got to rely on others. It taught me to trust people, which I already did, but even more. It taught me to respect other cultures, which I was just blown away by other cultures. And it gave me a lot of confidence. And it also gave me courage, I think. I always tell young people that you need to take courage. And what I did a lot on this trip is I even wrote it down and reminded myself of it. I would say, take courage, look people in the eye, shake their hand with a firm handshake, ask them questions, and then listen. And I tried to do that a lot. And that's what I tell young people. It's amazing what you do when you ask other people for help or ask them questions. And it's amazing what you do if you have courage, that good things come to you if you take courage.
I think that's some great life advice. I can't even imagine if I told my parents I was going to go hitchhiking around the world at 21. So you definitely have taken courage, and I think it's really cool to learn about, relying on other people, but also relying on yourself to have those experiences and build your skills. One of the last questions that our teachers had is that they were very curious to know what your day-to-day is like.
Well, it depends on whether I'm traveling, which, of course, if you're day-to-day and traveling, there's no day-to-day because it's totally unpredictable. But if I'm home, my day-to-day is, I need a lot of time alone, and so I get up super early and I read for an hour, and then I walk for an hour trying to figure things out, and then I stay at home for a couple more hours, and then I go in to face the day. So I sort of get that time alone in the morning, and then I have the energy to go all day. So that's what I do. I try to spend those couple hours reading and walking and thinking, and it works for me. Everybody's got a different schedule, but that works for me.
So, Anna, we've asked you a lot about leadership, about your role as president and CEO, and we have one last question for you, and this might be the hardest question that we ask you all day, but it's one we ask all of our guests. Can you tell us what your favorite plant is?
Yeah, that is a hard question because, you love them all, right? Well, I like to think that my favorite plant is whatever's in flower, whatever's in season. But if you force me, which you're doing, to pick one, then I would pick the peony, which, by the way, is just about to come into flower. Maybe when I get home tonight, it will be in flower in my yard. Because the peony I always think of it as just outrageous. I mean, the bloom is just outrageous. And it also lasts for a very short time. So that it's something you tend to appreciate more because it's not there very long, so you have to enjoy it while it lasts. And I always try to be in town when the peonies bloom, because if I'm traveling and I miss them, I get really depressed. So I love peonies.
Yeah, they're not only are they beautiful, but they also have amazing smell as well.
That's right.
So.
That's a big bonus.
Well, Anna, thank you so much for joining us today to be on this podcast. I think it's just been really fascinating to hear your perspective as what you do as a leader for this company, the multi-generational company, and, how much you advocate for not only being your true, authentic self as a leader, but expanding your horizons, asking questions, listening, traveling, reading as much as possible. I think it's just great advice, and take courage that I think that you are making a huge impact with not only your business, but being on this podcast for our listeners. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
This episode of Planted, Finding Your Roots in STEM Careers, was made possible by the Morton Arboretum and the Multimedia Services at College of DuPage. Check out additional resources and bonus content at www.mortonarb.org/plantedpodcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, and share, and let us know what you think. This is Jessica Turner-Scuff
And Megan Wiesbrook.
and we hope you'll continue to join us as we journey into STEM careers.